Is this the dagger?
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the On the Ball podcast from Friday Sports Network. I'm your host, Pranav Sriraman, joined by my co-hosts, Christian DeBlock, Thomas Stapleton, and Will Lachlan. Guys, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk some basketball.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. I haven't been excited for a show like this in a little while, so I'm ready to get going.
With that being said, guys, before we get into it, make sure you guys download our mobile app, the TWSM mobile app. It's the best way to access all of our content, our articles, our videos. So make sure you guys do that as soon as you can. But with that being said, guys, let's get right into it. So the Pelicans hired Stan Van Gundy as their new head coach. This is a team that features one of the most electric young cores in the NBA, and they're bringing in a guy who has a little bit of success. He was successful in Orlando, if you want to call it that, with Dwight Howard, JJ Redick back then in 2009. He made a finals, lost to LeBron a couple times. And, yeah, so that's basically Stan Van Gundy's resume. Guys, do you think this is a good move for the Pelicans? Will this help Zion, Lonzo, Ingram's development? Or did you think they got the wrong guy? I'm going to start with Thomas here.
I really like the move. I like what Stan Van Gundy is going to bring to the table. Now, obviously, I think this is going to be one of those scenarios where he's just a player development coach. He's going to be with them for a couple years. He's going to develop guys like Lonzo and Zion and Brandon Ingram, and he's going to really elevate the team for a couple of years. But ultimately, I don't think he will be the head coach when the Pelicans are championship contenders. I think he'll just be the kind of move the needle coach. He'll take them to the next level, but he won't take them to the top. One player that I really think is going to thrive under Stan Van Gundy is Lonzo Ball. I heard a Zach Lowe podcast the other day where he was talking about how he wanted Lonzo Ball to be more than a spot-up shooter. I think we're going to see some potentially big strides from Lonzo Ball next season. I'm excited to watch him and Zion on the court at the same time. They've got Brandon Ingram. They've got a good team. They're talented. They're young. They're exciting. And they're bringing in a new head coach who, hasn't coached in, a couple of years now, but he knows his basketball. He knows this stuff. He's incredibly smart. He's had some coaching success before. Let's bring it in. Let's see what happens. I mean, we can just go with guys that are, boring picks. Like they could have hired, Kenny Atkinson or something like that. Why not roll the dice? Why not, spice things up? See what happens with Stan Van Gundy. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Well,
yeah, I actually think that Kenny Atkinson would be a little bit more spicing things up, but I do agree that Van Gundy, it's a solid hire. I like the hire. I don't love it. I also don't hate it. I've seen a lot of mixed, reviews from people like on social media. But to me, I'm kind of in the middle on it. It's a solid hire because, you're getting a well-respected coach who's been established. He's had multiple jobs with the Magic and the Pistons, and you kind of know what you're getting. I believe the Pistons, when he was coaching them a few years ago, they were a top 10 defensive team. And when you look at their personnel is not as talented as this Pelicans team. And yet, so he kind of had that Pistons team overachieving a bit. So I'm expecting the offense to hopefully, run through Zion the entire course of the season, like it kind of was when he came into the lineup after his injury. Schematics wise, I'm expecting a little bit more of, he actually has JJ Redick, who he's actually coached before, like Pranav mentioned. So I'm expecting more of these kind of like handoff plays with Jrue Holiday or JJ Redick. So Zion maybe could develop a little bit more as a playmaker. I agree with you, Thomas, Lonzo can definitely develop a lot more under Van Gundy. I think this could be, I'm not going to rule out the possibility that Gundy will be there long term, but I think it's more likely that he is, like you said, the move the needle guy who develops the players and takes them a little bit to the next step and takes them into the playoffs for sure long term. He could be the guy, long term who takes them to their championship aspirations, but I'm not as confident as I am about the former. The one thing I want to see is hopefully Zion if he can develop a pick and pop game with Lonzo Ball in the pick and roll, that is going to be absolutely deadly. So it's a good hire because he's better than Alvin Gentry. So that's an improvement in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points you made. Like Thomas mentioned, I don't see this as a hire that gets them to the championship they want to be at down the line, but I do think this is an improvement on Alvin Gentry. The one thing I wanted to note is Dwight Howard, when he was back in Orlando, he was a one-time All-Star that previous season, and then he made the All-Star team every other season that Van Gundy was under him. I'm interested to see what Stan Van Gundy can do with Jackson Hayes, who they picked last year. He's showed some flashes of ability to be a really athletic center who could be a defensive presence, but they also have Derek Favors. But that might be interesting to see because he did do well with Dwight Howard. So, and then also, like you just mentioned, their young core is so good. If they can get Lonzo Ball to improve as a shooter and even just improve in all facets of his game, we all know what Zion looks like going down the line. And obviously, Brandon Ingram should be back. He is a restricted free agent, but I do expect them to re-sign him. So they have the young core to do it. It will be interesting to see if they can make the playoffs next year, but I think this is a good hire, but not the hire that's going to get them their championship.
So in terms of Stan Van Gundy, like Will said, I don't love the move. I don't hate the move. It's just a move, but I really respect Stan Van Gundy because if you take a look at each of his years in Orlando, besides the last year where that roster was diminished, he either had a top 10 defense, a top 10 or a top 5 defense, or a top 5 or a top 10 offense in the same year. Every single year he had a top 10 offense and defense. And I think you have to credit some of the success. A lot of it goes to Dwight Howard, who was the best defender at that time. But you also have to credit it to Stan Van Gundy. As Christian pointed out, he was a major part in Dwight Howard's development. And the scary thing is, I think this Pelicans team is more talented than those Orlando Magic teams. I think they have more potential than what those Orlando Magic teams had. And those teams pushed Kobe and them in the finals. They gave them a tough challenge. They beat LeBron in the East, given that LeBron's teams were to the same caliber as the Orlando Magic, is still a success. So I think Stan Van Gundy is a well-respected coach. I think it was a good move. And as a Lonzo Ball fan, I absolutely love this move. I think right now I'm going to predict Lonzo Ball will win the most improved player of the 2020-2021 NBA season, and a large part of that will have to do with Stan Van Gundy giving Lonzo the keys to the offense. I know he's the main playmaker anyway, but he's going to have so much more freedom in terms of scoring, playmaking, just always having the ball when he demands it. And I think that's going to be critical for Lonzo's development. So I think it's a good move.
See, I picked Lonzo Ball as most improved player last year, and that didn't work out for me. So that's the only reason.
Because his teammate won it. His teammate won it.
Yeah.
But moving on, the Pacers fired Nate McMillan, which was a shock to mostly every NBA fan out there. It was a shock that they fired Nate McMillan, who's revered as one of the best coaches who can make a terrible or a mediocre situation a good situation. They fired him after they extended him, which is very weird, and hired the Raptors assistant coach, Nate, I hope I say this like Jorkson or something like that. They hired the Raptors assistant coach, and this move, I'm going to start off with Christian here because I'm just overall confused on this move. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so it's an interesting move because there were some rumors that maybe a Mike D'Antoni was going there. I'm not sure who else was possibly rumored to go there, but on the face of it, I don't hate it, to be honest. This guy obviously was coaching with Nick Nurse, so it's an interesting hire because this is a guy who was on a championship team as an assistant. He's been with Nick Nurse since 2007 when he was back with the Iowa Energy in the D-League. So they've had a relationship for a long time. But this core is interesting because we don't know what Victor Oladipo and Miles Turner will be if they are on the team next year. So it's a good core. It's not a great team, but if this guy can turn them into something, it would be pretty remarkable. But I don't hate it. I don't love it. I think it's an okay signing.
Will, how about you?
Yeah, to me, it's just so unexpected. I don't really know what the heck we're going to get from this guy, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of like a wait and see. Like, we'll see, are the Pacers an improved team? I mean, they were the number 4 seed in the East, so it might be hard to improve, especially when the Nets are coming back with KD and Kyrie. So I don't see their seeding necessarily improving, but they might have a better chance in the playoffs because they did get swept. But we'll see. He was assistant to Nick Nurse, so that's good. And people say he's very similar in terms of coaching style to Nick Nurse. And I love Nick Nurse. I think he's the best coach in the league, or at bare minimum, top 3. So that's good. He seems, I believe there are reports that the players, like Victor Oladipo, seem pretty excited about them signing this coach. So that's good, because Victor Oladipo, we've seen him have some thoughts that he's come out and said, like, oh, I might not want to be, re-sign with the Pacers, and he might just want to demand a trade. But maybe this puts him more in the direction of staying with the team, which is always good to keep a franchise player like that, even, coming off that kind of injury. So to me, I think the keys for this guy is really I can't pronounce his name like you pronounce. I have no idea. I'm just going to call him Raptors assistant coach, new Pacers coach. The new Pacers coach. Can he, manage? Because there are some trade rumors with the Pacers, because there's so many pieces with the Pacers. They're solid pieces, but they haven't really meshed together yet. Miles Turner, Victor Oladipo, and even Jeremy Lambs, guys like that seem to always be in the trade rumors, just because they're solid pieces that could probably do better if they were in a championship situation, which the Pacers are not in a championship situation, because they have a bunch of players that are solid role players, but they don't have a star, like a legitimate star player, a legitimate superstar player. So to me, if he can manage some of these trade rumors and be on the same page with ownership and the front office and the GM, then I think it'll be a solid signing. And if he is anything like Nick Nurse, I think that's a good thing, because Nick Nurse is incredible at developing players. And if he's also pretty good at developing players, then I see this as a pretty good hire.
I know this is, it was a complete shock, because this guy wasn't in the running. There was no rumors about, if any Raptors assistant coach was in the
I'm going to be completely honest here. I did not know who he was before he was hired.
Oh, I didn't either.
Yeah.
I thought if they were going to sign an assistant coach, I thought it would be Ime Udoka. But I've got to say, I know nothing about the guy, but he was with the Raptors. He's got that championship pedigree from winning the title. It's a bit of an unknown, so there's not really too much I can say, because I know literally nothing about the guy. But the Pacers like him. Obviously, it must hurt for the Raptors, but I'm rooting for it. I think it's going to be pretty good. Again, I know nothing. I don't know who this guy is, but I think it's a good move.
So the Pacers are one of those teams that just happen to be stuck in the mud. Their franchise history, they've just always been stuck in the mud, not been able to get to where they want to meet, which is an NBA championship. And part of that has to do with the fact that they're in Indiana, not an attractable market, but they've never really had the talent to do so. Well, I think they hired the Raptors assistant coach and got rid of Nate McMillan, because I think they're going to go into a rebuild. I don't really see why they would keep Victor Oladipo, Miles Turner. I think the management knows that this team, they're a good team. They're not winning a championship. It's just that simple. Why would you keep guys who are at best second or third options on a championship team? Get rid of them. They have value. TJ Warren, his stock skyrocketed inside the bubble. Get rid of him while you can, while his stock is still high. Try getting possibly a package with Victor Oladipo, a TJ Warren. Try acquiring a number 1 pick. Try acquiring a number 2 pick. Indiana has to do something, because they've just been stuck in the mud their entire franchise history. And if they just keep the same roster, run it back, they're not going to go anywhere. So that's why I think they'll rebuild. They got rid of Nate McMillan for that reason, and they're just going to start over. That's my takeaways from this movie.
Honestly, they're in what we call NBA purgatory. They're not good enough to really compete, and they're also not bad enough to be like a top 10 pick.
Do you get rid of Sabonis, though? That's the big question I have, because I don't know if you necessarily want to give up a guy that was a first-time All-Star this season, is likely only going to get better from here. Do you guys think they should move on from him?
As an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, you and me know that Domantas Sabonis is a good player. Don't get me wrong, but I don't see his ceiling being extremely high. That's just my takeaways. He's going to be a really good player, a good big man, but he's not someone who's going to change your franchise. But right now, when his stock is high, considering this weaker draft class, I believe you have to just tank, get rid of it all. You're not winning a championship. I mean, Thomas, you might want to keep Domantas Sabonis, but answer this: do you think the Indiana Pacers are going to win a championship with Domantas Sabonis as the number one option?
Absolutely not. No
way. Exactly. Get rid of him while you still can. It's the harsh truth. The Pacers box office, if they even have any ticket sales, is going to go completely down. I don't care. The Pacers, they're a boring team to watch. You have to find something. Save your franchise. Tank.
If there was one piece,
ripping into the Pacers.
Yeah, if there was one piece that would stay on this team, it would probably be Sabonis. I kind of agree with you, Pranav. There's just really no reason, especially if like you said, his stock is relatively high considering he made an all-star team. And, he wasn't that – obviously, we didn't really see him as being an all-star this quickly, especially when you looked at him on the Thunder with Russell Westbrook. He really wasn't doing anything.
Didn't deserve his all-star appearance.
Right, exactly.
Bradley Beal.
But, yeah, to me, yeah, you can trade Sabonis, especially if the deal is right, then absolutely do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Pacers, they're just one of those teams which they're in a small market, but not an attractable market. They don't have a great GM like a Sam Presti, where in a small market you can make it an elite market. They don't have someone like that. They won't ever have the great draft capital unless they acquire it and get rid of everyone. So that's what they have to do. But moving on, we're going to talk about the team that has the number one overall pick, and that's the Minnesota Timberwolves. We've been hearing so many rumors going on, whether they want to acquire Ben Simmons. Now they're shifting their focus to LaMelo Ball as their number one pick. That's what the rumors are saying, that they want to draft LaMelo Ball over anyone else. It's just all up in the air. So, guys, what do you guys do if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves? Do you trade the pick for an established player, or do you draft LaMelo Ball or an Anthony Edwards, or do you possibly move on from Cat, a possible option, move on from Cat, and just acquire a bunch of young assets? Guys, what's the move here?
I don't think you move on from Cat whatsoever. That's just no, you don't touch that. The number one option has to be to acquire another star player. I think that's just hands down the best option here. If you're going to continue to waste the prime years of Karl Anthony Towns, it's not going to go well. I'm not comparing Karl Anthony Towns to Kevin Garnett by any means, but they failed to surround Kevin Garnett with any kind of talent, and they never won a championship. If you don't surround your stars with talent, you are not going to win a championship. So they had
an old Sam Cassell as their second option. That's horrendous.
Exactly. And D'Angelo Russell is somewhat on a Sam Cassell level.
He's horrible. He's horrible in my opinion.
D'Angelo Russell?
No. I'm not like the high. Horrible is an exaggeration in terms of D'Angelo Russell, but in my opinion, he doesn't provide much to a basketball team.
I don't like D'Angelo Russell either. But anyways, I just think I heard the report for Ben Simmons, and I did some more digging, and apparently it's not a real thing. Like, he was more talking about it as like an interesting idea, not as an actual like report. But if you can get Ben Simmons, absolutely. I've talked about it before. I think it's the perfect move. But if you can't trade for an established star, you absolutely go for LaMelo Ball. In today's NBA, having multiple ball handlers is extremely beneficial for your team. Having a bunch of guys who can create shots for themselves and create shots for other. You're getting the best player in the class. You're getting the best passer, the best ball handler, and you're getting another guy with an extremely high ceiling. And while it may take a couple years for him to, really break out, when he does, him and Karl Anthony Towns is going to be an absolutely frightening duo.
Yeah, I agree with Thomas. I would definitely go as the number one option of trading for an established star. You can't waste Towns' years right now. They've made the playoffs once, and that was when they were the 8th seed and they got completely outplayed by the Houston Rockets in that one year. They were the number 1 seed. But if they do love LaMelo Ball, I would go for LaMelo Ball as well. I think he's clearly probably the best player in this draft. Anthony Edwards, maybe there were some rumors that was possible, but if they don't trade for a star, I would definitely take LaMelo Ball and create something that could bring them some championship success down the line. It's a long shot right now, as it looks right now, because the Minnesota Timberwolves haven't been relevant for a long time. since Kevin Garnett was with them. So if I would be them, I would definitely take LaMelo Ball if they can't get an established star.
Yeah, the reason I'm going with them just straight up drafting LaMelo Ball is because I just don't know what star that they could get. I mean, Ben Simmons, sure, but I don't see the Sixers getting rid of Ben Simmons at this point because he just got injured for this playoff run. And, I mean, sure, if he was there, maybe they probably still wouldn't have beaten the Celtics. It would have been closer. But still, they're probably going to run it back with at least one more year. They're bringing in Doc Rivers. So I don't see them moving on from Ben Simmons at this point. Maybe next offseason. So I just don't see a star who would be available for the Timberwolves yet. I mean, we'll see if any rumors pop up. But to me, the answer is draft LaMelo Ball. I agree. I think he's the best prospect in the draft. I think he has the highest ceiling. Thomas, like you said it all. I mean, he's the best passer. And he fits with both Cat and D'Angelo Russell. More D'Angelo Russell because D'Angelo Russell, he provides volume, scoring, and shooting is really what his game is. And I think that could contrast pretty well offensively. I mean, defensively, LaMelo Ball and D'Angelo Russell in the backcourt is definitely questionable. But offensively, that's a pretty scary duo just because you got one guy, both guys can handle pass, and hopefully LaMelo Ball can develop a better jump shot. But he has great shot creation. They just both have a great combination offensively that I think meshes pretty well together. And, I mean, you have Karl Anthony Towns as well. So as a trio, that's an excellent offensive trio. Defensively, not so much. I mean, at least they have Josh Okogie.
Highly suspect. Highly suspect.
Yes. Highly suspect defensively trio, but offensively, that is excellent. But hopefully they can surround him with some wings who can play defense or something. Because if they want to get to a championship with those core three guys, they would have to get some defense. They do obviously keep Josh Okogie because he's basically the only perimeter defense they have, and pray that Culver can develop into a productive player or just a bench player who can actually get minutes. Because at this point, that might be his ceiling. I mean, they already kind of know that they screwed up on that pick. Like they've already come out and said, yeah, we definitely screwed the pooch drafting Jarrett Culver where we did. But to me, I just don't see a star that's really going to be available at this point yet. And to me, LaMelo Ball fits better than Anthony Edwards because Anthony Edwards he's more of a scorer than he is a passer. And LaMelo Ball, I think his best attribute is his playmaking, which would contrast better with D'Angelo Russell in my eyes.
So I didn't know I was going to have the privilege or the honor to rant about D'Angelo Russell on this podcast today. But let me just start off with the fact that the only reason D'Angelo Russell is wearing a Minnesota Timberwolves jersey is not because the Timberwolves desperately wanted him or whatever reason. It's because they wanted to keep Cat from walking out the door earlier than expected. D'Angelo Russell provides little to no value to a basketball team. Atrocious defender. Offensively, he's terrible without the ball in his hands. Will, you mentioned the fact that LaMelo and D'Angelo can sort of work together. I don't believe they can because both of them need the ball in their hands to be effective, and I would rather have LaMelo Ball being my primary ball handler than D'Angelo Russell because D'Angelo Russell is a very average playmaker as well, while LaMelo Ball, I believe, will be an elite playmaker from day one. So the move here is you draft LaMelo Ball, and I know this is not going around circles right now because, they got D'Angelo Russell for one reason, and to prevent Cat from leaving earlier than expected. He's going to leave eventually, but earlier than expected. I think you should, from a basketball standpoint, trade D'Angelo Russell while GMs think his value is somewhat high. You find a defensive player, probably trade for a Karis LeVert. That's a more realistic option. Even though that's highly unlikely because Brooklyn had D'Angelo Russell and got rid of him. So I don't know what you do with D'Angelo Russell. He's a pretty untradeable player. That's why Golden State wanted to get rid of him so quickly. And there wasn't really many suitors for him in free agency. The only reason the Timberwolves got him is because they didn't want Cat to leave, so they got his best friend. But I don't know what D'Angelo Russell provides to a basketball team. So if you can, from a basketball standpoint, it's not going to happen. Get rid of D'Angelo Russell, find some compensation, even if you have to get a Robert Covington back and something like that, and you draft LaMelo Ball. I just don't like D'Angelo Russell at all.
I saw a report when D'Angelo Russell got traded that Golden State was more upset that they had to get rid of Glenn Robinson III than they were.
And they had to give up. They had to give up more to get Andrew Wiggins than the Timberwolves had to give up to get D'Angelo Russell. More GMs are catching on to this.
Yeah, I mean, he really provides high volume scoring and shooting. That he's not a very efficient player at all. But
I'm asking you this, Will. He provides high value scoring and shooting, but on a team that's already so potent offensively, why do you need more of that? That's the question.
Well, without D'Angelo Russell, they're not as potent, are they?
They have the #1 offensive rating in the league with Cat. Mm-hmm.
Over the Mavericks?
Over the Mavericks. That's surprising.
But
just with Cat.
Yeah, that's shocking.
Yeah, but just with
the highest of all time. I mean, I say the Timberwolves keep him just because he makes Cat happy, and you don't want him leaving the door.
That's why he's there.
So yeah, that's probably the #1 reason you keep him. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of D'Lo, he only has a residence in Minnesota. If he ever sees this, you're only there because you're Karl Anthony Towns' friend. I'm sorry, you do not provide much value to a championship contending team. Not saying the Timberwolves are, but even then, like I've heard people argue that they made the move for box office reasons. I don't think many people are going to pay an extra $40 to go see D'Angelo Russell play. No, if they're going to pay an extra $40, it's because the opponent is that good or LaMelo Ball is in the stadium. They're not going to pay to watch D'Angelo Russell play. It's just that simple. His box office value and appeal is not that high. They got him because they don't want their franchise player to leave them again. Kevin Garnett left, got a championship his second year. Kevin Love left, got a championship his first healthy year. The next K big man in Minnesota, Karl Anthony Towns, will eventually leave, and he might be a championship. He might win a championship once he leaves. They just want to prevent that from happening quicker than it's going to happen. So that's why they made it.
Last thing I just say, Timberwolves, do not trade with the Knicks. Do not let the Knicks get the #1 overall pick. Have no assets, no business trading with the Knicks. Do not do it.
Knowing the Knicks, they'd probably take Cole Anthony #1 anyways.
Yeah, we would do that.
No, they've already said they're going to pass on Cole, which is actually a good move. But we're going to move on here. We're going to get to Bradley Beal, and we're going to talk about Bradley Beal for a long time as we wrap up the show. But we're going to start off with the rumors surrounding Bradley Beal. Some rumors circulating around the NBA is that Bradley Beal might end up being a Golden State Warrior. The third Splash brother might just end up being in the Bay. Guys, do you think they should make this move, acquire another star, trade their second pick to Washington, or that's not what they need? They need something else. Thomas, you have this look on your face. I'm going to start off.
Why? Well, like I don't get the point. I don't like Bradley Beal is a great player, but you don't need more stars. You've got Steph Curry, one of the best players in the world. You've got Klay Thompson, an all-star caliber guy. You've got Draymond Green, one of the best ceiling raisers in the NBA. You need depth. You don't need another star. And you've got the second overall pick. People love to just, throw it out the window and, just throw it in any trade offer. The second overall pick still has value. People like to say this is a weak class. And while the star talent, at the top may not be as it was in years past, there are still guys with plenty of potential at the top of this draft. So you can't just, go around. I understand Bradley Beal is a great player, so this doesn't really pertain to him. But the second overall pick has value. Trading for Bradley Beal for the Warriors, just why? Like, I just don't get it from a basketball standpoint why you would do that.
Before I give the floor to our Wizards fan here, Will, I'm just going to say I would believe Will would be thrilled to receive the #2 pick and seeing his guy win a ring. Will, what would your reaction be? Trade happen?
The Warriors are one of the I'm going to break this down more from the Wizards just because I am a Wizards fan. And we can all break this down from the Warriors, but from the Wizards' point of view, Warriors are really one of the few teams that I would actually be okay with us trading Bradley Beal to, because a lot of times people on the internet, they'll say, "Oh, we'll just trade for Bradley Beal, trade Kyle Kuzma for Bradley Beal, or trade Duncan Robinson for Bradley Beal." No, those guys are not even close to as good as Bradley Beal. But the Warriors, they have draft capital. I guess we would have to get Andrew Wiggins just because of money reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I guess I'll take Andrew Wiggins. You see the tone of my voice. I'm not really excited about that, but whatever. because it'll work because of the money. But they make up for it because they have the second overall pick. They also have the Timberwolves pick next year, and the 2021 draft class is stacked. So I would be pretty excited to get the Timberwolves pick. I don't see the Timberwolves, especially in a tough West, competing too much. Even if they do draft LaMelo Ball, maybe if they got Ben Simmons, then they'd be something.
They're projected to be 13th. I mean, even then,
right, exactly.
Improvements,
it's going to be pretty good. That should hopefully be a top 10 pick. And if we did trade Bradley Beal, we'd also have like a top 10 or probably top 5 pick in next year's draft as well. So we would be stocked up on draft capital, which I would like. But I don't think it's going to happen just because I don't see the Wizards actually doing this, especially since Bradley Beal seems committed as ever to the Wizards for reasons that I don't really quite understand, even as a Wizards fan. But I'll take it because, hey, I have a Bradley Beal jersey, and now I get to keep that jersey, with him still on the team. But anyways, to me, really, the Wizards, they're not going to do it just because this seems to be just a take our bearings kind of year for the Wizards. What I mean by that is John Wall's coming back, so they just kind of want to see, okay, how good is John Wall? I mean, I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in his prime, which is, 2016, 2017. He's not going to be that good. But it's worth seeing just how good he is and if the Wizards can actually make the playoffs, adding John Wall, drafting whoever with the 9th pick this year. So it's just kind of let's see how good we are kind of season. I can definitely see if the Wizards are struggling hard by the trade deadline, I could definitely see Bradley Beal getting dealt at that point, or even next offseason if the Wizards completely flop and don't even make the playoffs, which would be a complete disaster considering we're getting Wall back. I mean, we should jump the Magic.
Before I shift it to Christian, what's Wall going to do? I believe Wall, people won't like to admit it, it's John Wall, but he's just going to be like your average 6-man type of point guard. I don't see him becoming a superstar once again. Yeah, his athleticism, his game, like we're talking about Klay Thompson or Kevin Durant coming off catastrophic injuries. Their games aren't predicated on athleticism. John Wall's entire game was built on his ability to get to the paint and dish it out or score at will in the paint. He won't have that same luxury anymore. And I've seen the clips going around of him playing pickup ball with Michael Beasley, pure hooper, getting the 3. That's not gonna. I have to see it in a game. He's not even then. He's not gonna change into Steph Curry overnight. So what do you think Wall will necessarily provide, which would make Beal want to stay in Washington?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
All right. I agree. I don't think Wall is going to be when he back in 2016, he was a legitimate star point guard in the league. I don't think he's not going to be that good. He's going to be an above. I'm hoping, this is me really being hopeful, that he's going to be an above average point guard, better than Eric Bledsoe, which I think is fair because Eric Bledsoe is pretty trash at this point.
I mean, he's good defensively.
But a better version of a regular season Eric Bledsoe. I agree. Points per game, his points are definitely going to drop just because of that athleticism, but he can still pass. He was still an elite passer. And I understand some of that is predicated on him getting, to the paint and dishing out. But to me, he just still has excellent court vision, and I don't see his athleticism declining, really affecting that. And hopefully, when he's engaged, he was an All-NBA defender, I believe, at one point in his career.
His defense is going to be taking back.
It's slowly dropped off a cliff, honestly, and it's really whenever he's engaged, he can still be a really good defender, but he's just not giving 100%.
You said it was slowly dropping anyways. Now it's just going to topple all over.
Yeah, I mean, when he's engaged, he can be a good defender, but that's the thing. It's when he can be engaged. And
even then, you can be engaged. You can be engaged at defense, but sometimes when you suffer an injury that bad, you're just not the same. Like, I hate to say it, but you just don't have that same lateral quickness or that agility. You're going to get blown by. It's just, I hate to say it, but I believe that's going to be John Wall on defense this upcoming season.
I mean, I still think he has some skill on the defensive end side.
His IQ is
solid. Right. He's a really smart defender, so I'm hoping he just can, give more effort than he has in the past on defense because his offensive game is going to drop off, at least scoring-wise.
I think Wall's just going to be like a 16-7 guy with bad efficiency and no defense. I don't think that's too unreasonable.
Yeah, if I had to give him a stat line, and again, this is me being a hopeful Wizards fan, I would say 17 to 18, 8 to 9 assists. I'm hoping for some average defense. And efficiency, his efficiency. He's not a good shooter. If he improves shooting, Thank goodness.
I'm gonna let Christian. Before I let Christian chime in real quick. We're all so critical of Russell Westbrook on this podcast. Basically, in 2016, 2017, one has to understand that John Wall in 2016-17 was basically what we're seeing of Russell Westbrook right now. Like an inefficient point guard, not very portable, needs the ball, needs maximum space. And even though Russell he was in a more situation catered to himself, what does John Wall really provide better than Russell Westbrook at this point? And he's just going to be even worse. So I don't know what we're going to get.
All I'm going to say is he's an improvement over Ish Smith and Isaiah Thomas. So.
Well, not Christian, how about you?
Yeah, so for the trade between Bradley Beal going to the Warriors, it seems all great and all to have a third guy that can pair up with Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and even a Draymond Green. My concern just would be the bench depth of the Warriors, and I know we talked about it a couple weeks back. The depth of that bench is not good. Eric Pascal and a couple other guys, and we talked about the idea of maybe getting Denny in the draft and then maybe Wiggins on the bench would be an interesting idea. But if they were to make this trade, you would expect the second pick, Wiggins, and maybe even more to be sent for Bradley Beal. So in that sense, I wouldn't even want to think about doing that. It doesn't necessarily fit great for them. While he's a great scorer and he averaged over 30 points a game this year, I just don't love the fit. And I know Will would love some interesting pieces back, but Andrew Wiggins just isn't something that they would want. So it seems all great and all on the surface, but in my eyes, I just don't see it happening, and I don't even know if it would be a great fit in general.
Yeah, my mock trade would be the second pick, the Wolves 2021 pick, which should be a relatively good pick because I explained that earlier. Eric Pascal, who can be a solid bench player, I guess. And Andrew Wiggins, just because of money reasons, he would have to be in the deal, basically. That would be my mock trade. I would be okay with that, considering the other deals that I'm seeing. The only other team that could possibly put together a better trade is the Nuggets, I suppose. So the Nuggets and the Warriors are the two teams that, if Bradley Beal ends up getting traded to, I'd like to see him on those teams. And I would love it if Bradley Beal could win a ring with the Warriors.
So in terms of Golden State, my question is just like Thomas. What the hell is the point? I mean, Bradley Beal was second in scoring this season, 30 points per game, 57% true shooting. Impressive. But he's not going to have anywhere near the same usage he had in Washington. In Washington, he was top 5 in usage at 34%, which is gross in terms of defense, in terms of usage. With Steph, with Klay, with Dre, with him and now in the equation, that's not going to be as high as it once was. And you're not going to get the same version of Bradley Beal, maybe a more defensively attentive version because of the system. But other than that, he's not going to provide you much value offensively as you would hope to, because he needs the ball in his hands. Steph and Klay work well without the ball, but in a given situation, you would want Steph and Klay being your first two options, and then you get to Bradley Beal because simply they're just more efficient than Bradley Beal, and they're better at what they do. So in terms of Bradley Beal and Golden State, I don't really see the fit being really that perfect. If for Will's reasons, if he wants to see Beal win a ring, that's great. But I mean, we have to look at it from a schematics perspective. I don't really think he's going to help them win a ring. They need depth, they need size, and especially they need rim protection. So the move for Beal doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, it could end up being better for us, the Wizards, than it could be for the Warriors. Which I would love.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on, and we're going to rank our top 5 NBA duos going into the 2020-21 season. So I'm going to start off with Christian on this one. Who are your top 5 duos, and give me an explanation as to why you ranked each duo where you ranked.
Yeah, so number one, of course, you're going to have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They just won the championship. They're 2 of the top 5 NBA players right now, so that would be my clear number one. I had some trouble with number 2, and I ended up going with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I didn't like the way Paul George played in the postseason, but he's still a very good player, so I will keep them there. 3, I have, and I wanted to pick Giannis and Middleton, but I ended up going with Jimmy Butler and Bam just off of their postseason success. I think Jimmy Butler proved a lot of people wrong with the way he led that team, because people have always considered him a bad guy in the locker room, but that didn't show, and obviously Bam Adebayo has turned himself into a really good player. Giannis and then Chris Middleton at 4 now, that duo kind of seems like it's been it hasn't performed the way it should have in the postseason, and that's why it's dropped. But then again, Giannis is still a all-time – he looks like he's going to be a very good player and a very elite player for the rest of his career. And then I have Jokic and Jamal Murray, similarly to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. They had a very good postseason, and that's why I have them in the top 5.
So you snubbed KD and Kyrie and Stephen Clay, essentially.
I totally forgot about KD and Kyrie, to be quite honest with you.
But Stephen Clay, you snubbed Stephen Clay.
I guess I also forgot about them as well.
The injury.
Is it because of injury reasons?
I honestly forgot about all 4 of those. I was just going off last season, but
so if you were going to implement those 2 duos, where would you rank them?
Then I would probably take both of. I would probably take out both of those duos would definitely go in the top 5. I would definitely put KD and Kyrie at 3 then, and I believe then Steph and Clay would be right there at 4, and then I would probably still keep Jimmy Butler and Bam at 5 just because of their postseason success. But yeah.
Thomas, how about you?
All right, so number 1, I've got LeBron and AD. That's not. They just won an NBA championship. Don't think there needs to be much of an explanation there. At number 2, I've got Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. I think those 2 are, quite honestly, the best backcourt in NBA history. The way the 2 play off each other. Steph Curry is one of the most impactful players in basketball, the best shooter, one of the best scorers. Klay Thompson is obviously a terrific scorer, terrific shooter, and a great defender as well. And the success those 2 have had, that you just simply can't ignore it. At number 3, I've got KD and Kyrie. My reasoning for putting KD and Kyrie below Steph and Klay is because, 1, we've never seen KD and Kyrie play with each other. I think they'll be just fine, but we've seen what Steph and Klay are. We haven't seen what KD and Kyrie are yet. And we still don't know just how good Kevin Durant will be when he comes back. Again, I think he'll be fine, but I just think I'd rather play it safe and put Steph and Klay above them. At 4, I've got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I understand that they underperformed in the regular season, but Kawhi Leonard is still a top 5 player in the world. Paul George is still an all-star caliber guy. Those 2 can both create their own shot, can both hit the 3, can play defense. And then number 5, I've got Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. We've seen what those 2 can do in the postseason. Nikola Jokic, great scorer. He really improved his shooting efficiency, especially from downtown in the playoffs. And Jamal Murray was just playing like a bona fide superstar in those playoffs as well.
So before I get to Will here, Thomas, so you had KD and Kyrie at 3, but then you proceeded to say you had them there behind Steph and Klay because you've never seen them play. So I was wondering, why do you have them so high over other guys such as Jimmy Bam or Jokic Murray? Because we've seen them play, but how do you already know that KD and Kyrie are automatically –
because
I get where you're coming from, but I just want like an explanation as to –
So simply because, well, yes, we haven't seen them play. Kevin Durant, top 5 player in the world. Kyrie Irving, top 15 player. If you put,
we don't know if KD's going to be top 5 once he returns.
That's true, but I'm basically going off what I project them to be. I'm going to take them over guys like Kawhi and PG simply due to talent. I think Kevin Durant, the last time we saw Kevin Durant, he was at a Kawhi level, and I think Kyrie Irving is much better than Paul George. And then Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, I don't really think that's too much of a debate. I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are easily better than them in terms of pure talent. I'm basing it off, obviously, you've got to include the injuries, but look at the last time we saw Kevin Durant. He was dropping 30 points per game on insane efficiency in the playoffs. I understand there's going to be some drop-off, obviously, but the talent of those 2 is just too immense for me to put guys like Kawhi and Paul George over them.
Will, how about you?
Yes, mine's going to be pretty similar, except for my number 5. Bron and Anthony Davis, there really needs to be no explanation when it comes to those guys. My number 2 is Curry and Klay, and it's really just because of the fit and the familiarity. I mean, they've literally won a championship as a duo before, being like the top 2 guys on a team, and they won 3 championships together. So I have to put them just because of, familiarity reasons over KD and Kyrie and Kawhi and Paul George. My number 3 is going to be Kawhi and Paul George, and I have them over KD and Kyrie really just because we've seen them play and because of the two-way ability. That overall impact on the game is just incredible when you think about how they can play on both ends. And, KD coming off an injury is a little bit of a question mark. But like you said, Thomas, their talent is just too great for me to rank them any lower than number 4. Like, for me, 4 is the lowest, and even they could end up being number 2, depending on how they fit and play together, and depending on if they maybe make the finals and make a championship run potentially together. So they could easily move up to number 2 by the end of the season. I just can't rank anyone else like a Giannis or Middleton or a Jamal Murray or Jokic above them, just purely because of their skill, both as individuals. And then my number 5 is actually going to be it's more of a projection. It's not really based on last season, but it's really just based off a little bit of what we saw from last season and how I project them at the end of next season to be, and that is Luka and Porzingis. I think that they will be a top 5 duo by the end of next season over Harden and Russell Westbrook. I was like, should I put Harden and Russell Westbrook? And he's like, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to project that Luka will be just as good of a player as James Harden, if not maybe even better by the end of next season. And I think Porzingis, is he better than Paul George or is he better than Russell Westbrook? I mean, he may be better than Russell Westbrook by the end of next season. We'll see. But their fit as a duo is they are a perfectly fitting duo. And they were breaking out, and they were going toe-to-toe with Kawhi and Paul George in a playoff series when Porzingis was actually on the court. So I think they're going to be a top 5 duo by the end of next season. A little bit more of a projection, but I still think they're going to be top 5.
So at number 1, I obviously have to go with Lonzo Ball and Zion. I'm just kidding. So I'm going to go with LeBron AD. That's an obvious one. And to Thomas's point, when I asked him about KD and Kyrie, why he ranked them so high because they didn't play. Well, I did the same thing last year. I didn't see LeBron and AD play. They were number 1 because of the talent and the fit. And then at number 2, I have Curry and Klay. Although KD and Kyrie might be a more talented duo because of Kyrie predominantly. I just feel that Curry and Klay are a better basketball fit than KD and Kyrie, who are 2 isolation scorers. And so I have Curry and Klay number 2. And then I have KD, Kyrie number 3. The talent is just obvious and evident what they can do on the basketball court. Even if they aren't the best fit together, I believe their skills and capabilities, even just in isolation, is good enough to earn them that number 3 spot. And at number 4, this is tough, and I probably have to go with Luka and KP. I'm very high on this duo. They had the number 1 offense ever, and Kristaps Porzingis is no scrub on defense. Luka Doncic is not a great defender, but he has the skills, possibly the IQ, to be a good defender. But right now, just what they bring on the offensive end has me. I'm very high on them, so they're at my number 4. And then I possibly have to go with Kawhi and Paul. I don't know. Kawhi and Paul George are at number 4. My bad. So I have to go Luka, KP number 5, Kawhi, Paul George number 4. They are the best basketball fit. Kawhi and Paul George, they are a great defensive duo, but in terms of offensive value, they pretty much do the same things. So they kind of get in each other's way often. But just the talent, their defensive prowess has me ranking them at the number 4 spot. And then, like for the reasons I mentioned, for Luka and KP, they're at number 5.
Yeah, respectable.
So we're going to move on, and we're going to get into some debate action with our guys. Will, Thomas, Christian's going to get into it a little bit, me as well. Well, that's the 4 of us. But we're going to get to Bradley Beal, like we mentioned earlier. So if Thomas, do you want to start, or you want me to start with my take?
I'll start. All right. I will take Donovan Mitchell over Bradley Beal. All right. In the regular season, I don't think this has I don't really think it's that close, but Bradley Beal was the better player in the regular season. But there are a couple things I want to point to. One, his eye numbers were inflated. Why do I think this? I think
you cut out for a second. What? Okay, you're good now. You cut out for a second.
Yeah, we didn't really hear what you said.
I believe Bradley Beal's numbers were heavily inflated. I think that when you look at the fact that the Wizards were quite literally the worst defense in the league, and they had the 5th highest pace in the NBA, Bradley Beal could essentially put up all the numbers he wants, all the stats he wanted to. He also had a 34.4 usage rating. He had good scoring and on good efficiency, but outside of that, he wasn't really anything spectacular. Granted, neither was Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell was a 24-point-per-game score, just slightly under league average. He didn't play as bad on the defensive end as Bradley Beal did. I think Bradley Beal was, I believe, the second worst defender in the NBA behind right in front of Trae Young. When you're on a Trae Young level of bad, that's absolutely atrocious. Donovan Mitchell wasn't anything special, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't near the liability that Bradley Beal was at that end of the court. And then in the playoffs, now this isn't an argument against Bradley Beal because obviously he didn't make the playoffs, but more to uplift Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell averaged 36 points per game on a 69.6 true shooting percentage. That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
I did not know it was that high.
He shot I believe 52% from the field, 51% from three, and 96% from the foul line. That is absurd. That's absolutely absurd. And when you consider the fact that Bojan Bogdanovic was out, he was basically the only offensive threat on that team, so the attention was on him the entire time. They didn't really have any other shot creators. Mike Conley was playing extremely well. And they came a Mike Conley, whatever happened on that last play where the ball literally went in and out, to beating the Denver Nuggets, which, we didn't think was going to be a close series back when we predicted it. And a lot of that credit has to go to Donovan Mitchell based off how spectacular he was. So I think Donovan Mitchell is the better basketball player than Bradley Beal.
And before Will continues, Pranav, thoughts on Shaq hitting on Dwight Howard? Well, Shaq, I guess he's just salty. I mean, Dwight Howard was a crucial part to the Lakers' success, so that's pretty much my take on it. But Will, present your case.
Yeah, so look, I love me some Donovan Mitchell, man. I mean, he's an electric basketball player. I think he's the best player on the Utah Jazz. But I think Bradley Beal is simply the better basketball player. Look, let's start defensively. They're both not very good defenders. Sure, you can give the advantage to Donovan Mitchell, but to me, the fact that they're both just not good at defense, I can't even really take defense much into equation. To me, it's whoever's the better offensive player is just the better basketball player, just because they both leave so much to be desired on the defensive end. And I just think in every area on offense, Bradley Beal, outranks Mitchell in terms of both production and skill. I think he's a better overall shot creator from really any area on the court. He can just create his own shot more easily because of his handles, and because of his shooting ability. I mean, he's a better shooter. Bradley Beal's his shooting percentage was a little bit down this year. It was, I believe, at 35%, which is down for his standards. But career-wise, he is at 38. So I mean, while his numbers from three were a little bit worse, he is still a very, very good shooter. And I think the reason his numbers were down is a little bit because of that volume. His points skyrocketed, but his overall three-point percentage dipped a little bit, but he still has that three-point shooting capability in him. It's just that his percentage was a little bit down. So I think he's the better shooter. I just think he's the better scorer overall. I think he's also the better playmaker now that he's, his playmaking has vastly improved. And I know you could just point to the assists and the volume and say, all right, well, he's kind of forced to be a better playmaker. But that's kind of my point, is that, he was kind of forced into a situation and he took advantage of the opportunity, and he improved his playmaking. And, Donovan Mitchell isn't a great playmaker. He improved a little bit. I did see some improvements from the playoffs compared to the regular season in his playmaking, but not enough to what I've seen from Bradley Beal. So to me, I just think Bradley Beal is the better offensive player in really every category, which to me just makes him the better overall player.
Neither Donovan Mitchell nor Bradley Beal are great passers. They simply only have I wouldn't even call it high assist per game numbers, but they only have assist per game numbers over like 3 and 2, simply due to the fact that they have the ball all the time. Neither of them are good playmakers. Shooting wise, Donovan Mitchell shot 37% from three compared to Bradley Beal's 35% from three. So I think shooting is, I wouldn't go as far to say Donovan Mitchell is the way better shooter, because I think it's extremely close. But I think this year you could definitely make a case that Donovan Mitchell was the better shooter, especially when you consider how much better he was in the playoffs. I know it was a relatively small sample size, but I mean, the dude shot 52% from three in the playoffs, taking like 12 attempts a game. That's absolutely ridiculous.
I hear you on the shooting point. I just think it's kind of an eye test thing for me a little bit. It's just that when I watch Bradley Beal play, he's proven it, multiple years in his career that he is an excellent shooter, whether it's creating off the dribble or whether it's catch and shooting. He's just great all around. And Mitchell is, 37%. That's pretty good. But when I watch him play, I just don't think he's a better overall 3-point shooter.
Before I interject,
Bradley Beal is.
So, Will, you talked about you've seen for multiple years that Bradley Beal is a better shooter. Well, in terms of shooting longevity, Bradley Beal, good job. You have that category. We're talking about right now. What I see from Donovan Mitchell, he's drastically improved as a shooter, and he can hit the big shots in the playoffs. So, I mean, I want to know where
but
the conclusion.
I'm not even talking. I'm just ignore production. I'm just talking the skill of shooting the basketball. I still think Bradley Beal is a better shooter than Donovan Mitchell.
And I could say Bradley Beal is the best shooter on the planet because my eyes say so. But is that true?
No, it's not. But that's an outlandish statement. I think saying that Bradley Beal is a better shooter than Donovan Mitchell is not that crazy of a statement.
It's not a bad take. It's not a bad take.
It's not a bad take because Bradley Beal has way more volume, but can't that be attributed to a lot of Bradley Beal's stats? His defense was horrible. The pace that his team played at was top 5 in the league. His team played absolutely no defense whatsoever, which completely inflated his numbers. We've seen Donovan Mitchell put up seriously good numbers on a seriously good team this year. And not only that, in the playoffs, he willed his way to a 7-game series that, by the way, the Denver Nuggets with a much better team. The Utah Jazz should not even have been.
I predicted them to come back 3-1.
You predicted the Nuggets to come back from 3-1?
Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone knew the Denver Nuggets were the better basketball team. Well, why was that series so close? Especially with Bojan Bogdanovic, a 20-point-per-game scorer and a 42% three-point shooter. He was out, and Donovan Mitchell willed them back in because he consistently created shot after shot. You can say Bradley Beal is the better shot creator. You can say he's the better shooter. That's fine. But let's not act like Donovan Mitchell is – Donovan Mitchell is also a tremendous shot creator. He's also a tremendous shooter and scorer. And one could make the case that Donovan Mitchell is the better mid-range shooter, the better foul line shooter, the better finisher. Like there's a lot of things that go into scoring as well that I think you've got to give Donovan Mitchell some credit as well, especially when you consider how much better he was in the playoffs. It was a night and day difference.
But to Will's point, I'm going to test like you do keep bringing up the playoffs. Bradley Beal never got that chance. So
right,
true. It's not like if that makes any sense. It's not like to downplay Bradley Beal. It's more to uplift Donovan Mitchell. It's not like saying, "Oh, Bradley Beal," because his team was really bad. But it's more to uplift Donovan Mitchell. We've seen what he can do in that situation.
Yeah, I understand that. And to me, that's kind of why it's as close as it is between those two guys is because he took advantage of, him being in the playoffs and being in just a better position. But I can also make that same case for Bradley Beal. He has complete freedom on that team because he's easily, obviously, the best player, and there's no other all-star on that team. So he's put it up with these numbers because he's taken advantage of the opportunity that his team's really been given. So I kind of see the arguments on both sides. It's just, to me, I think if you put Bradley Beal, I don't really want to play the switch situation game here, but to me, I think Donovan Mitchell wouldn't be as good leading the Wizards as Bradley Beal has been. That's just my opinion. I don't really have any stats to back that up.
I mean, in terms of leading the Wizards, what's Bradley Beal really doing? Stat padding? I mean, he's not leading.
Right. I don't think he would put up as much volume as Bradley Beal has.
I mean, I guess that's fair, but
that's a hypothetical we can't prove. So basing it off what we know, I don't think that's valid.
Well, not even that. What is the volume really leading to? What did Bradley Beal's stats really mean in the grand scheme of things? He was just above average in league efficiency. He was absolutely horrible on defense. Yes, he was a great scorer, but he didn't provide anything else at a very high level. He got his assists off of, simply being on the court. I believe he was I'm going to check this now, but he was I want to say he was like top 5 in minutes per game. He had an incredibly high usage rate. His team he was actually 5th. He was 5th in minutes played. His team was 5th in pace. His team was also last in defense. His stats are completely inflated.
Look, the point. I'm gonna tell you what his stats actually mean, and I have a pretty good statistic there, but I'm gonna mention it later because I want to mention it for the Jrue Holiday debate. So I'm gonna save that. I'm not even gonna mention it right now. But I would argue without Bradley Beal, the Wizards would probably be the worst team in the entire league. So he elevated the Wizards.
How much worse can you get?
To the 9 seed.
He's a floor raiser, but he's not giving them their floor. Instead of a number 1 pick, it's a number 8 pick or 9 pick. I mean,
if you take any great player off any team in general, then yeah, they're going to do. Obviously, I'm not putting this on nearly the same level, but if you took LeBron James off the Lakers, would they win the finals? No, probably not. You can't just pick and choose where to take players and drop them off. I'd argue that the Jazz probably would have been swept if they didn't have Donovan Mitchell, but I would never bring that up in an argument
definitely.
because it's pointless to debate.
Sure. Yeah, at this point. Although I wouldn't say Donovan Mitchell willed them to Game 7. I mean, they had a 3-1 lead and they blew it. So
Christian, you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, so I'm torn, but I think Donovan Mitchell is the guy I would take in my opinion. I think this, and yes, like Thomas mentioned like 2 or 3 times, you can't downplay Bradley Beal just because he wasn't in the playoffs, but you can uplift what Donovan Mitchell did in the playoffs and prove his point, which I saw him pretty much score 50-plus points in Game 1, and I honestly, after they lost, did not expect them to go to a Game 7. I thought the series was done. I thought it was going to go no more than 5. So, and they didn't have Mike Conley for, I believe, it was 2 or 3 games of that series, and while he didn't have a great series, he was better in the playoffs than he ever was in the regular season because everybody was talking about Mike Conley and how that wasn't a very good move on their part. And like you mentioned, Bogdanovich was not available, and he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA. He averaged 20 points this season, and nobody ever talks about him. So he was missing a lot, and yet he still managed to get them to a tight series with the Denver Nuggets team that made the Western Conference Finals. But Bradley Beal on his own is a very good player. I just think that he was stat padding a lot this season, and rightfully so because the Washington Wizards were not a good team this year. But I would take Donovan Mitchell slightly over Bradley Beal.
I also don't understand how you could take credit away from Bradley Beal for stat padding when that's literally what that's all he had to do to get the Wizards to where they were.
It wasn't like Westbrook type stat padding, but I'm just inflated stats. It's inflated stats.
Yeah,
like
inflated.
He wasn't like hunting for stats.
Yeah.
But you know what we mean by essentially the stats didn't lead to much.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Will, I would love you to present your case for Bradley Beal being over Jrue Holiday, who I would love you to present why you believe Bradley Beal is better than him.
All right. So Bradley Beal and Jrue Holiday, and look, don't get me wrong, I love some Jrue Holiday. I mean, I said it last week, right? He's the best perimeter defender in the entire NBA, and I still believe that. I'm not going to downplay and say, oh, Jrue Holiday is not a good player anymore just because for the sake of this debate. He's absolutely an excellent player. But to me, so I'll just get my case started. Bradley Beal is a far better shot creator in every single way. He's just as good of a playmaker in my eyes. And I would say his efficiency is more impressive given his volume. I believe their efficiency is virtually identical from the field and from 3. But Bradley Beal has a much higher volume, so I would say those efficiency numbers are more impressive than Jrue Holiday's because of that. And let me just get this out of the way. Defensively, yes, there is a gap as wide as the Grand Canyon between these two guys. Bradley Beal, one of the worst perimeter defenders in the league statistically, and he's a bad defender. Eye test, stats, analytics, he's just a bad defender all around. And Holiday is, according to the analytics and stats, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And really everyone, Kevin Durant and other guys have said that, Jrue Holiday, he is the best perimeter defender in the league, and he gets very undervalued when it comes to the media. However, I just value, Bradley Beal's offensive skill set over significantly more than Jrue Holiday's, two-way skill set, because Bradley Beal is a significantly better offensive player and a proven first option. And he's just a star player in the league. And my overall point here is really I understand the defensive gap. I believe the defensive gap is wider because Holiday is, he's a productive offensive player, and he's obviously extremely valued defensively. But I just value Bradley Beal's offensive skill set and the fact that Bradley Beal is an offensive juggernaut, and the stats prove it, and what we see on the court proves that. And so I believe, Bradley Beal's, because he is so elite offensively, that I would take that over Jrue Holiday's two-way game, as excellent as he is. And here's my wild statistic. Bradley Beal, this is how good of an offensive player he was this past season. He's one of 4 players in NBA history to average over 30 points per game on 45% shooting from the field and 6 assists. One of 4 players to do it over the course of a season. I know it's a shortened season, but still. You know who the other 3 players are? Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, and James Harden, 3 of the best offensive players of all time. That's how good of a season Bradley Beal just had. I'm not saying Bradley Beal is as good an offensive player as those guys. I'm just saying that's the kind of historical production that he was putting up. And to me, Bradley Beal, he works extremely well as a first option, and he stepped up his game. He's improved every single year. And I think he can be a very good off-ball and a very good second, third option, even though he hasn't gotten to prove it like Jrue Holiday has because of his three-point shooting. And we haven't seen him do that just because of the role he's been on his team. I think Bradley Beal is pretty portable. I think, he's put up incredible numbers as number one option, but I think, as he would still be an effective number 2 or 3 on a championship team if he got traded to a contender, like the Warriors. I mean, maybe, that team defensively would be pretty handicapped, possibly, because Bradley Beal.
I don't believe that team would be a championship team.
Well, they wouldn't be any less of a contender than they are now.
So, in terms of the 30 points, 45% field goal, 6 assists, I mean, when you have a usage percentage of damn near 35, hey, man, you can average that. That's what happens. That's what happens. So, in terms of offense,
and Michael Jordan.
Okay, and he had a higher usage than Steph Curry, and I'm not sure about Michael Jordan and James Harden. They probably had a higher usage than Beal. And I'm not saying it's not impressive, but what does that stat really actually mean? We know how good Bradley Beal is at offense. So I'm going to break it down real quick. Bradley Beal is a better offensive player. I don't think anyone here disagrees with any of that. He's a better shot creator. He's a better shooter, better scorer. Playmaking might go to Jrue Holiday, but it's not a wide gap. And the scoring value Bradley Beal presents and the efficiency, he is more efficient than Jrue Holiday. That value he presents gives him the offensive edge. Got it. It's a significant edge. But the defensive edge, which Jrue Holiday has over Bradley Beal, is just too much for me to discount. Bradley Beal is an atrocious defender. I think you mentioned it. Jrue Holiday, one of the best guard defenders in the NBA. And I'm one of those guys who is I don't really like to give the two-way how do I say this? The two-way player, the narrative that two-way players are automatically better, that's just not something I agree with because I look at the total impact. If a one-way player on offense or defense, like Rudy Gobert or like a Steph Curry, has such a grand impact to the point where it surpasses one of a two-way player, then they're the better player. However, the same logic applies when you're comparing if a two-way player has an impact that surmounts the impact that a one-way player has, then I believe that player is a better player. And that in this case, that simply is what Jrue Holiday presents. You want to look at any metric, I could throw that out there. Jrue Holiday leads in those, but that's not the point here. In terms of defense, there's a wide gap. And then in offense, Bradley Beal is a better offensive player by a margin, but Jrue Holiday is also no scrub on offense either. And in terms of the impact, Bradley Beal theoretically should have a higher impact on his team's success than Jrue Holiday because as a number one option, you keep pointing out that Bradley Beal is a number one option. Well, it doesn't matter how bad his team is. The fact that he has such a bad team should mean his impact on his team should be even higher, and that impact should be even more inflated, like you see with Trae Young, with Karl Anthony Towns. Their impacts are so inflated because their teams are weak. I hate to say it like that, but their teams are just absolutely horrendous, so their impacts are inflated. But in terms of Bradley Beal, we're not seeing that. And I think a large portion of that does have to do with usage. And in terms of the second option, you did point out how Jrue Holiday has been given that opportunity. This year he was a second option scoring-wise, but he was the best player in the team, in my opinion. But in terms of Bradley Beal, he wasn't as developed when he was a second option. I give you that. So we haven't really seen him thrive in that role. But in terms of portability, I don't think anyone beats Jrue Holiday in terms of portability. I mean, he could you plug him in anywhere and he could fit. But I think Bradley Beal lost a little bit of his portability value due to him becoming such a ISO-dependent, high-volume scorer. So all in all, it's very close. You could pick your poison, but I have to go with Jrue Holiday because of what he presents. His total impact overall it just gives it to me, and I believe that his total impact is greater than what Bradley Beal presents offensively.
So to really uncover what you said, I think our difference really becomes I value an elite offensive player more than I do an elite defensive player, just because the game, it's a more offensive game. I mean, the rules, the coaching schemes, literally everything favors the offensive players nowadays. And really, at the end of the day, I would say in today's NBA, the best offense will beat the best defense for the most part. So it's just an offensive game. So I value elite offensive player more than an elite defensive player. And I just think Bradley Beal is, because he is such an elite offensive player, the numbers, the skill, the eye test, everything proves that Bradley Beal is an elite offensive player. I think that trumps slightly Jrue Holiday's two-way impact, even though his two-way impact is pretty great. Yeah, that's my overall take on it. But before Thomas says something, I just have something I want to pull up on my phone real quick and show to the camera. This is on Instagram, an Instagram post by. Can we see this?
Will.
What is this?
You have to understand that a lot of things.
Jrue Holiday, number 7 from
Will,
Sports World Debates.
Mr. William Laughlin, if that's your full name.
World
If
Debates.
that's your full name, Mr. William Laughlin, you have to understand.
I just pronounced it wrong.
From summer, a lot of things can change. A lot of
Bradley Beal hasn't played a game since June. You posted this on June.
The way you process
nothing
basketball
has changed. Bradley Beal has not played a single game, and Jrue Holiday has played 6 games.
I know
Thomas
has some cold takes on his page, and that's because he had a different thought process in the summer compared to what he has now.
What happened in your thought process to change it? There's a 3-player gap in between your list with Bradley Beal and
in terms of
what changed so much?
Everything changed. I never even used evidence to make that post. It will, but a new post will be coming soon.
CJ McCollum at number 8.
Yeah, that's correct.
Barely above CJ McCollum, so that's.
I probably still have CJ McCollum around that range as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of Jrue, I've just realized how undervalued he is, and I've actually looked into it more. Okay, Will.
Ralph himself has Bradley Beal over Jrue Holiday.
I had Victor Oladipo over him. Calm down. Calm down.
I don't know why you have Victor Oladipo.
Victor Oladipo probably wouldn't be featured on my next list.
Close to that, Bradley Beal hasn't played a single game, and Jrue Holiday played 6 games in the bubble, and he averaged a whopping 15 points per game. So,
okay, Will. But right now, here and now, we're not traveling back in time. You're talking to me on October 23rd, 2020. I believe Jrue Holiday is a better basketball player than Bradley Beal.
I'm telling you, no evidence has changed since you made that.
No evidence has changed. The fact that the thing which has changed is me. I use evidence now. I just don't go off.
What evidence have you used now that you didn't use back then?
Well, I didn't even factor in the defensive value. I didn't know his defensive value was that high. And the fact that he's just so undervalued. I haven't seen I didn't even look at stats to see just went off my gut. But
not calling back his older self.
Hey, we could bring him here, and then I can give him a lesson. I don't know. Do you have a time machine? I don't know. But Christian, what are your thoughts? Who would you take between Beal and Holiday?
Yeah, so you said it before. It's pretty tight, but I would also go with Jrue Holiday. I think the gap defensively, and while Will is arguing that defense isn't as important if you're talking about what matters more, I would still take Jrue Holiday. I think we said it last week. I think the interesting idea of him going to Brooklyn for Karis LeVert and how that could really propel the Brooklyn Nets to a possible championship next season. I think he's a very good player, and while Bradley Beal is an offensive juggernaut, and like Will has mentioned that, I still would take Jrue Holiday just because his ability to play both sides of the ball and just the ability that he's going to possibly be in trade rumors with a bunch of teams that could be contenders next season.
Yeah, can I point out one thing real quick? There's a reason why Bradley Beal is on all these trade rumors from the Heat, from the Nuggets, from the Lakers, and the Warriors. What trade rumors are Jrue Holiday in? The Nets. That's it.
The Nets and the Nuggets. The Nuggets.
Oh, the Nuggets.
There isn't a market for him.
There
isn't a major market for him because you have to understand. Will.
I don't know. Maybe.
Will, the trade market for Bradley Beal is higher than Steph Curry's trade market. Does that mean he's a better player? No. Jrue Holiday wants to stay.
Two players who have a market.
Jrue Holiday wants to stay in New Orleans.
Have a market because he's too good.
He's not desperate to. Okay, Bradley Beal wants to stay in Washington, but Washington reeks. I'm sorry, they're horrible.
I agree.
New Orleans has one of the brightest futures in the NBA. Why would Jrue want to willingly be in trade rumors to leave that? There's no reason why they would want to get rid of Jrue Holiday.
I'm just saying those are two players who actually have a value, and Bradley Beal seems to be the more
a trade value because
maybe that's because he's a better player.
The Pelicans are no rush. That doesn't mean anything.
Not only that, it's a theoretical trade value. No one's actually been traded. We don't have an actual trade package. No one's been traded for anything. So we really can't say one player has a higher trade value than the other. I would say Bradley Beal probably has a higher trade value.
Miles Turner has been in trade rumors since the day he was born. But does that mean he's one of the top 5 players in the NBA? No.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying.
Well, what are you trying to say?
More trade value.
Are you trying to say Beal is the better player because he's trying to get shipped out of Washington quicker? I mean, like, I want to know how does that correlate?
Pranav, you're misconstruing my point. I'm not equating. Miles Turner has more trade value than Steph Curry. That means Miles Turner is a better player. That's not what I'm saying. I'm comparing two guys who have real trade value to contending teams. And so far, from what we know, Bradley Beal seems to have more of it. It's just an extra point that I threw out.
I mean, has he been traded?
No.
No. It's all just
extra
rumors.
Point, but he seemingly at this point has more trade.
It's all rumors. We don't know anything. So
because teams who are contenders would rather have Bradley Beal because he's a better player than Jrue Holiday.
A contending team would rather have Steph Curry, but that's not happening.
Why is Washington so willing to give him up?
They're not. Not yet, but teams want him.
Teams want Jrue too.
I'd say more teams want Bradley Beal from what we've seen so far.
What inside sources do you have that gives me that?
Literally all the rumors, the Lakers, the Warriors.
The rumors.
They're rumors from evidence.
I need concrete evidence. I'm not saying the Denver Nuggets have had rumors. The Brooklyn Nets have had rumors. That hasn't happened yet. We don't know how to measure trade value until it happens. Bottom line, with the evidence I've been provided by all the great websites out there, whatever you want to call it, I believe Jrue Holiday is a better player. Just that. But guys, this has been a really fun show. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Draft is coming up soon. NBA season might start Christmas Day. Will turn off your phone.
Remember this, ladies and gentlemen.
See you all later.
Pranav thinks Bradley Beal is a better player than Jrue Holiday.
No, I do not.
Is this the dagger?